Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, my co-host, Stephen Young of Roto-Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the Go Bowling at the Glen NASCAR Cup Series race here on Running Hot. Last weekend's race was won by Michael McDowell, who scored his second career win and the fourth win ever for Front Row Motorsports, and McDowell's first win since his 2021 Daytona 500 victory. He held off a late charging Chase Elliott for the win. Daniel Suarez rounded out the podium in a race that only featured one caution, which came out on lap 2 when Joey Logano got into Justin Haley. So very clean race. Great win by Michael McDowell. That's Front Row Motorsports' first win that didn't either come at a drafting track or the fog out race for Chris Buescher. So they wiped the field here. Michael McDowell wiped the field. Stevie, what did you think of that race?
I thought the race overall lacked a little bit, but the best cars were up front. So, I mean, how do you really argue with that? Like, I would prefer this race over what we had at Indy the last couple of years there, where you know what to expect whatsoever through turn one. I like the restart zone. I thought it was a great change. And I mean, one caution and a lot of green flag racing is going to produce, I don't want to say boring racing, but with no tire fall off on a racetrack like that, I mean, it's just going to create cars not being able to pass. So there wasn't a ton of passing. I mean, some fast cars were able to move through the field, but I mean, it was a road course. That's a road course. Like, that race right there is what everybody wanted, 5 or 6 of every single year. And I mean, with this new car, if you're good and your car is good, you're going to run up front on these road courses. It's going to be tough to touch you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd rather have this than the mess we've seen at Indy Road Course the past couple years. Made it nice and predictable. We try to handicap speed, and when the speed wins out, that's a very nice thing. So congrats to Michael McDowell on the win, locking himself into the playoffs. We're going to have an exciting end to the playoff season here as well, or, to the regular season getting into the playoffs here. I think it's going to be very exciting. So that is our Indy reaction. Now it's time to look ahead to another road course race. That's right. The NASCAR Cup Series is heading to Watkins Glen International. So back-to-back road courses. Watkins Glen is an 8-turn, just under 2.5 mile road course. It was repaved back in 2015. So, there is definitely some tire fall off at the Glen, but it's not a crazy amount. So overall, Stevie, what are we expecting from Watkins Glen? Are we going to see something similar to Indy Road Course or something different?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be pretty close to what we saw last weekend. I mean, maybe a few extra cautions than last week, but I mean, a few drivers have already talked about like the extra runoff that they have this week at Watkins Glen should potentially reduce some of the cautions. So, I mean, that's road course racing, but I mean, I expect the cars that were fast last week to be fast again this week. And yeah, a little bit of tire wear, but not even close to like a Sonoma. So, I mean, going back to what we were talking about last week with low tire wear road courses, I mean, I put this right up there with Indy Road Course and Coda as far as tire wear. So I don't think we'll see a ton of fall off. And I think fast cars that were fast last week will, come with very close setups. I even heard some teams talking about they'll have the same exact car that they ran last week, this week. So, quick turnaround time for the garage and the crew. But I mean, yeah, I think we'll see very similar type racing this week.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's going to be pretty similar. There will be certain things that I'll end up talking about in this show that I think could be a little bit different, but overall very similar. I mean, you have to think Team Trackhouse, for example, is going to be bringing the best equipment possible for Daniel Suarez like they were this past week. And, if he doesn't get the pit crew doesn't get the air hose stuck underneath his front tire, we may be talking about Daniel Suarez having locked himself into the playoffs instead of Michael McDowell. So I think, we'll see a lot of the same. Could be some small, subtle differences that I think we'll talk about as we get into our picks. But one final question before we dive into the picks. What do you make of this playoff picture, Stevie? Because right now, we've got a situation where Bubba Wallace is currently in, but if somebody else outside wins, then Bubba Wallace is out. And then all of a sudden, if we get a new winner at Daytona, it's like Kevin Harvick and Brad Keselowski fighting in the points to see who's the last one in.
Very interesting how this playoff situation is kind of shaken up now with McDowell winning this past week. Buescher with a couple wins there. He was pretty good on points anyway, but I mean, now absolutely locked in with 2 wins. So McDowell winning is, I mean, somewhat big because now it's like Suarez is almost in a position where he needs to win. We know Chase probably needs to win. Ty Gibbs probably needs to win. So I mean, potentially points there because Bubba's not the best on road courses, but I mean, we still have Daytona and we know how good Bubba Wallace is at Daytona. So, what I think is interesting is we come into this race and like Chase Elliott, we're going to talk about it. I think he's the favorite. I mean, he opened at like plus 550 and got bet to 350 already. Like, he is the guy that I think a lot of people are expecting to win this race. If that happens, I mean, like you said, we're going to be looking at, hey, Kevin Harvick, Keselowski going to Daytona. Like, we might have to, I think Keselowski would be ahead after this weekend because Harvick's been struggling so much on road courses. Like, we might have like a Harvick Keselowski points stage battles to try to get points while we're sweating somebody else winning the race. So,
same situation as last year with Blaney and Truex,
Oh,
so yeah. we may just have a repeat of last year, which would be pretty crazy. So
oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, but that can only happen if we get a new winner at Watkins Glen that is currently outside the points picture looking in. So that is going to do it for our Watkins Glen preview. It is time to dive into some bets. As always, we're going to take you for a lap around Watkins Glen. We're going to go through 4 of the 8 turns. We'll do half the track. Technically 8 picks, so, it's kind of like 8 turns. So 1 pick from each of us per turn before we drive into victory lane. So, Stevie, you're going to kick us off as we take the green flag and make that right-hander into turn 1. All right,
Yeah.
Stevie, lead the way in turn 1.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Alex Bowman top 10 plus 105. We're going to talk about it a lot here. There's not a ton of value here to open the week. And I don't know if we'll see a ton of value by Sunday either. I talked about this on Twitter last week saying that like there was just nothing I wanted to add last week. And I feel like this might be the same kind of situation, but Alex Bowman top 10 plus 105. He ranks 4th in speed on road courses this season. He top 10 finishes at COTA and Indy road course, which are the lower tire wear road courses. He ranks 7th in speed on road courses with the new car. He performs better on these low tire wear road courses. And again, like going back to what we were just talking about with the point situation, Alex Bowman's in a position he needs to win the race. So there's no more racing for points. They're going to be on the strategy that's going to give them the best chance to win this race where, we don't have stage breaks anymore. But right when you get in that fuel window and if you're running well, you pit. You don't care. So I feel like they're going to be on the strategy that they think is the best to have a chance to win this race. Same with Chase Elliott. I don't think they're worried about stage points. I think that Hendrick Motorsports with these 2 cars, they're going to try to put them on a strategy to win the race. So I like Alex Bowman's top 10 this week.
Yeah, I like that as well. My model's pretty high on Alex Bowman. It's lower than the market just because my model's pretty much lower than everything in the whole market. Like you said, it's tough out there this week. So, if I were to have a lean, I would definitely lean towards some Alex Bowman type picks. Speaking of leans, I am going to lean with this pick. It is Kyle Busch plus 120 over Michael McDowell. And the reason I'm just making it a lean here is because these error bars are still pretty wide, but it's even wider with Michael McDowell. If you listen to Denny Hamlin's podcast, Actions Detrimental, Michael McDowell was a guest on that show. And he said if they lock themselves into the playoffs, they were planning on bringing a new setup to Watkins Glen to test it out, which would increase his variance. It would increase his upside maybe a little bit if they hit on something, but the upside's already there, so it doesn't really help as much in the win category, but it could increase that downside variance, so fatten that tail on the downside of the distribution. So making that a little less safe because they have the ability to experiment now. They're locked into the playoffs. So if they decide to go that route, it fattens that downside tail from Michael McDowell. By the way, my model already does have Kyle Busch and Michael McDowell pretty much neck and neck. So getting plus money on it when I've got these two guys pretty close to a coin flip, it does favor McDowell a little bit without considering the change. You're still getting value at plus 120 on Kyle Busch. So right now, just a lean for me. I kind of want to see where this goes in practice with Michael McDowell's potential new setup. So Kyle Busch plus 120 over Michael McDowell for my turn one lean.
Yeah, I don't hate this. I do think that if you're Front Row Motorsports, you're like, what are you testing after how good you were last week? Just load that car up on the truck, do what you need to do with the engine, and then unload it again at Watkins Glen and go out and try to win a second race. Or throw a paint scheme on there for Todd Gillen and try to get him in the playoffs too. I mean, I don't know what you would do with McDowell after what you did last week, but yeah, I mean, overall, Kyle Busch has beat McDowell 3 out of 4 times this year on road courses, so I don't think this is crazy getting it at plus money.
Yeah, there it is. So 3 out of 4 on road courses this year, but the one, of course, was the big one last weekend at Indy Road Course for Michael McDowell. All right, that is a turn one. I was leaning on Stevie there in turn one. Stevie, you got a breakaway here into turn two. What do you got for us in turn two, Stevie?
All right, I'm going to pull away a little bit. We got Daniel Suarez, top 5, plus 170 at BetMGM. I'm very high on Daniel Suarez this week, just in general. I really wanted better like outright odds on Daniel Suarez this week, but we're just not getting them, which kind of stinks. He's qualified top 5 in 3 of the 4 road courses this season, so I don't know if we'll necessarily get even better odds than what we have right now. Fastest car last week at Indy Road Course was Daniel Suarez. You mentioned the tire hose incident. Like, he was the fastest car. McDowell won the race, and he was really good, but, you know, Michael McDowell had 2 fastest laps last week. So just to kind of put it in perspective, top 5 in speed at both of the low tire wear racetracks this season, 4th in speed on the low tire wear tracks with the new car for road courses. So, I mean, looking at all the numbers, this seems a little bit nice as far as plus 170. I would like it to be a little bit longer, but it's not going to be. So I'm going to take Daniel Suarez top 5 at plus 170.
Yeah, I like that for sure. You know, Daniel Suarez, I'm very high on this weekend as well. They're going to be bringing the absolute best equipment, Team Trackhouse, and arguably could have won that race at Indy if not for a mistake. So very, very good pick there for Daniel Suarez, top 5 plus 170 at BetMGM. For my turn 2 pick, I'm going to stick with this, not necessarily fading McDowell theme, but knowing they're locked in, knowing they can try some things. They don't have to win. They don't even have to have a great points day because they're not really going to make up any ground in the point standings to get them any extra playoff points. So, you know, maybe if they are really fast, they even end up just going for like stage points. And if an untimely caution that comes, that hurts them. So instead, what I'm going to do for turn 2 is I'm going to pick the other top Fords. And specifically, I'm going to go with Chris Buescher plus 360. And I'm going to go with Joey Logano at 9-1. Make sure you downsize your bet on Joey Logano there so that, you know, if you have a unit on Chris Buescher, you're winning 3.6. And if you do half a unit on Joey Logano, you're winning like 4.5 units, something like that. So control the unit size there. But again, we're just kind of going against this McDowell thing. But both Chris Buescher and Joey Logano are really good at Watkins Glen. Chris Buescher overall at the road courses has been awesome. Arguably the second best Ford overall among all the road courses in the next gen era. I would say definitely, not just arguably. He's finished top 11 in every single one other than the very first road course race last year. So Chris Buescher plus 360, but then also Joey Logano. He seems to show up at Watkins Glen. He's got a win. He's got multiple podium finishes. He was the top Ford last year. You know, I could see if you want to take a different Ford, maybe go an Austin Cindric route or a Chase Briscoe route, but those guys are shorter in price as well. So you have to consider that. But when you consider Joey Logano is either boom or bust at Watkins Glen, the fact that he's boom just means there is a lot of upside there for Joey Logano. So getting that top Ford price 9-1, I think is long enough that it justifies him as well for top Ford at Watkins Glen.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I saw you put this on the sheet last night. Buescher has moved to 4-1 in some places. So you were on this, and it's moving in your direction. So I like it. I mean, I'm not very high on Joey Logano, but I'm high on Paul Wolf. Anytime you get a strategy type of race, you have to put Paul Wolf at the top of the top of the board as far as crew chiefs are concerned. Just to kind of add in here, McDowell obviously hit on something huge last week. Todd Gilliland's 22-1, 24-1, some places for top Ford. Don't mind throwing a little sprinkle on that as well, just because, I mean, when your teammate hits on something that much, they locked in Gillen for next year already. So, like, they're definitely invested in him now, where we thought, like, Zane Smith was going to be in this car next year. So, I wouldn't be shocked if, like, Todd Gillen's car is set up very close to what McDowell ran last week.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And, Todd Gillen was really good here last year, but we do have to remember he jumped on those dry tires earlier than everybody else when we moved from the wet to the dry. So his speed is going to look artificially misleading. And then he only completed 28 of the laps. So it's just going to look like he crushed everybody when, there's a strategy play, and then he didn't have much else race to run after that. So still like him. He's still good here. And I think a sprinkle at 22, 24-1 could be worth it as well. So nice call there, Stevie. So those are turns 1 and 2. We got to head into turn 3. All right, Stevie, lead us into turn 3 here. Looks like you got an interesting head-to-head matchup.
I do. So, I mean, again, there's not a ton of value this week, so I was looking through everything, and just kind of stumbled across this one. Tyler Reddick over Kyle Larson plus 110. I mean, when you look at this matchup, obviously you're getting the Kyle Larson won this race last year bump here, and Kyle Larson being the favorite in this head-to-head. This matchup is 2-2 on road courses this season. Reddick ranks first in speed. Larson's 9th in speed on road courses this year. Reddick also ranks first in speed on road courses with a new car. He's been fast since the beginning of last year. It doesn't matter if it's a Chevy or a Toyota. Struggled at the beginning of Indy road course, but was one of the best cars there towards the end of the race. So, I mean, he's one of the guys that probably would have benefited from a caution with 10 to go. My model continues to have Reddick as the favorite over Larson in this head-to-head, so getting it at plus money is nice. I mean, you're taking two guys that probably going to competing for a top 5, top 3, potentially a win. So, I mean, there's very slim margins here, but getting it at plus money where my model has Reddick over Larson, I like it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll disagree with you here, just because my model has Larson comfortably over Reddick, and it's interesting. I look at all the different models out there. Some of them have Reddick over Larson. Some of them have Larson over Reddick. So it's one of those things where you're gonna have to blend all the different minds and models across the industry and make your own decision here. So for me, that's not a play, but I definitely understand it from your perspective and all the data and the model you're looking at. It definitely makes sense. So, that's why we always encourage everybody to listen around. Don't just blindly tail Stevie. Don't just blindly tail me, especially don't blindly tail me because I like doing some crazy things sometimes. But I think it's an interesting one. This is going to be a very interesting head-to-head matchup. I'm looking forward to following this one throughout the week. And who knows, after practice and qualifying, I may jump on it with you if that's the direction it's looking here. But for my turn 3 pick, I'm going to go with the 3 car, and I'm going to take Austin Dillon for a top 10 at plus 750. I think this is just a bet that I want to make again. I took Austin Dillon top 10 last week, 12-1 after he started farther back in the field, but he showed a lot of practice speed. And then in the race at Indy Road Course this past weekend, he actually passed Ryan Blaney for what would have effectively been 12th place on track. Of course, Brad Keselowski and Denny Hamlin were still on track, but an alternate strategy. So he got up to 14th, but it was really effectively 12th. Then that last pit stop came, and for whatever reason, all 3 RCR cars fell off. Kyle Busch had some engine issues, but Brody Kostecki also fell off and had to make an extra pit stop. I think the tire management there just wasn't quite good, and he drove back through the field again. And Austin Dillon didn't end up making an extra pit stop, but he just faded on that last sequence from what would have effectively been 12th to his 16th place finishing position. But if you get a driver that's showing mid-teens in speed and then drove up from 26th to 12th at one point in the race last week, that is too long for 12-1. That's still too long for 7.5-1. So I'm going to take Austin Dillon 7.5-1 for a top 10 finish.
I think Brody was like 11th or 12th in green flag speed last week.
Part of it was that extra pit stop, I think, helped.
I mean,
that extra set of tires.
For sure. And, Austin Dillon was top 15 in green flag speed. Kyle Busch was solid until he had the engine issues, which seems to be frustrating him from what we've read this week.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Austin Dillon, they're not getting themselves into the playoffs by points. So again, this is another driver that final stage or final fuel window kind of opens up. You're pitting. So I feel like you have to play the race as what's the best type of race for me to win this race, and like don't even worry where the cautions fall and stuff like that. Do the racing backwards strategy where you're just trying to win this somehow. So yeah, I mean, I like these guys for aggressiveness on pit road because of just where they're at in points. Like, Austin, the RCR team definitely looking towards Daytona next week as far as probably their best chance to win. But I mean, this is the type of race where strategy can play out and you could put yourself in a position to be in the top 10 late. And that's all we're kind of hoping for at these numbers.
Before we move on, now's a great time to talk about first impressions, because you'll want to make a good one. For me, that means taking care of my skin, which I'm doing with the help of our sponsor, Caldera Lab. The Caldera Lab regimen is just 3 products: the clean slate, the base layer, and the good. These products are clinically proven to deliver results. By using the regimen daily, you're using product packed with nature's purest and most potent ingredients to achieve younger looking skin in just 60 days. Start now, and you'll look younger before the end of the 2023 racing season. I just started the regimen myself, and I can already tell a difference. I know by the time that I turn 40 in just a couple months, I'll be well on my way towards preventing my skin from looking like 100-lap old tires. Just 1 minute in the morning and at night is all it takes to reduce skin damage caused by aging, weather, and sweating out those green, white, checkered finishes. And just for the Running Hot audience, we have an exclusive offer, their best offer anywhere. Use code RUNNING at calderalab.com and get 20% off right now. That's 20% off with code RUNNING at calderalab.com and make unforgettable first impressions that lead to the charming words, "You look younger." 20% off at calderalab.com with code RUNNING. Turn 3, the 3 car of Austin Dillon for my pick. And that means we got one more turn left. Turn 4, the funsy turn, as I'm going to call it, because Stevie, both you and I have some fun picks. So lead us into turn 4 here.
You call it the funsy corn. This is my favorite bet of the week. So we're gonna have some fun with it. On BetMGM, you can parlay head-to-heads. So what I did was I did a 3-pick parlay head-to-heads where I took Chase Elliott over Kyle Larson, Alex Bowman over Denny Hamlin, and Ty Gibbs over Bubba Wallace. So again, we've been talking about how we've been struggling to find some value. You're getting this at plus 400. So 4-1 parlay. Yeah, head-to-head parlays, not my favorite. Parlays in NASCAR, not my favorite thing. But when I'm looking at these head-to-head matchups, right, I have Gibbs well ahead of Bubba Wallace just in general. I think Elliott is the favorite to win this race. Larson wrecked him to win the race last year. No chance that's happening again this year, especially with Elliott still looking outside in. Jeff Gordon will have a heart attack if Larson wrecks Elliott this week. So I have Elliott way ahead of Larson. I have Gibbs way ahead of Wallace. I think Bowman and Hamlin are very close, but when I'm looking at the stats, my model definitely has Bowman as the favorite. Bowman has beat Hamlin in 3 of 4 road courses this year. He's had way more speed on the road courses and on the road courses with less tire wear, even dating back to last year. If we remember, he was competing for a win at COTA last year before that whole thing went down with Chastain, AJ, and him. So I give a slight lean to Bowman over Hamlin, but that's kind of where you're getting the 4-1 odds because of how big Gibbs is a favorite, because of how big Elliott's a favorite on the sports book. You're getting the odds at 4-1 because of this Bowman and Hamlin head-to-head. So, I mean, you could easily just bet the Bowman and Hamlin head-to-head, but let's have some fun, like you said, and make it the funsy corner.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you there. I got massively Ty Gibbs over Bubba Wallace. So a big favorite there. Agree with you 100% on Elliott over Larson. There's absolutely no chance Larson, competes with Chase Elliott for the win. If both of them are running 1-2 in the finish, you got to think Larson just kind of lays over, not on purpose, air quote, but on purpose. And so it really comes down to Bowman versus Hamlin, and I've got him close enough that if you're getting plus money on it, totally fine with that to make it a 4-1 head-to-head parlay. For my pick in the Funzy corner, I'm not picking something for this race. I'm going to take Christopher Bell to win the NASCAR Cup Series championship at 14-1. Let's think about this. First of all, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is in the playoffs. Michael McDowell's in the playoffs. They ain't winning the NASCAR Cup Series championship. So we're already down to like 14 drivers that could realistically contend for the title. Maybe even less than that. I think if Bubba Wallace does find his way in, or if we get an outsider from Daytona, Justin Haley wins Daytona, we could be looking at 13 cars that realistically have a shot to compete for the NASCAR Cup Series championship. You can't tell me Christopher Bell is worse than the average car that can actually compete for the championship here. So right now he's fourth in the standings. He's already shown he's one of the best drivers in the whole series, and every single round sets up nicely for him. He should get through the first round, no problem. The second round, of course, has the race he won last year at the Roval, and the third round has Martinsville, where he won at at Martinsville, I should say. And then Phoenix, short, flat track, should play into his style. So, and you got to think Christopher Bell will be favored over several other drivers like Brad Keselowski, Kevin Harvick, if they were to get in, even maybe like Joey Logano, those guys running towards the back half of the playoff picture looking in, even Tyler Reddick. So 14-1, and just way too long for Christopher Bell to win the championship.
My biggest issue with Christopher Bell right now is his pit crew, and it's cost him 2 or 3 wins already this year. Do we see a scenario, and I'm just like hypothetical thinking here, do we see a scenario where Ty Gibbs doesn't make the playoffs and they put the 54 crew on the 20 crew? Because, I mean, Ty Gibbs' pit crew is top 3 pit crew this year. They have helped him tremendously, and they've just been phenomenal. So do we see that scenario? Who knows? But, I mean, it just kind of adds some potential value. I saw this, and I was like, man, I really wish that I would have bet Buescher 20-1 when it was available, because I was looking at like what the playoffs look like as far as like tracks, and I was like, man, he could win at Bristol, he could win at the Roval, he could win at Martinsville, and I mean, he just showed how fast he was on the short flat at Richmond. So I think Buescher is like the sneaky one. But yeah, I think that Christopher Bell, it's all going to be about pit crew. He's had speed all year. He's one of the best drivers this year. He just, pit crew just keeps screwing him, really.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the case. But there is that, if Ty Gibbs doesn't make it, you absolutely have to think they make some changes for the playoffs, because why wouldn't you give your driver the best opportunity to win a championship possible? So those are our turn 1 through 4 picks. We got to complete the rest of the lap, and there's one really good driver who's completing the lap in here that's going to take us into victory lane. Who is that, Stevie?
We're going to go for it a little bit here. We got AJ Allmendinger at 17-1 to win this race, and it's been a rough go. He was really fast last week, and he was a little off strategy, but he had the most fastest laps. I think he had like 27 or 30% of the percent of the fastest laps last week, and a little of that was off strategy, but dude was fast. He needed 1 caution to get back on the lead lap, got spun out early in that race and just kind of got behind. And that happened at Watkins Glen last year too. Like, it was rainy at the beginning of the race. Austin Cindric locked up the right front and just slid into AJ, and he went to the back. And between everything, like, this dude was competing for a win at the end of the race after going to the back at the beginning of the race after getting spun. So AJ is always someone that I'm going to have up on top of my list. And I mean, you got to bring your best stuff. You have a chance at Daytona, but like, you have this racetrack circled. You can't point your way in anymore. There's no more of, hey, let's go out and try to, do well in this stage. Like, you have to, again, be on that strategy where we have to win this race. With Michael McDowell winning last week, these guys that were like fringy points guys to potentially get in, and with AJ struggling last week, you have to go out and win this race. So yeah, AJ 17-1 is where we're at. Hopefully seeing some confetti, and if we get some confetti out of AJ Allmendinger and Chase Elliott misses this race as well, Daytona is going to be wild.
Oh yeah, Daytona will be absolutely crazy if AJ Allmendinger wins this, or even if Chase Elliott wins it, it's still going to be wild just because you got a bunch of drivers looking to race their way in, and you'll have Brad Keselowski and Kevin Harvick trying to point their way in, if not win their way in as well. So, gonna be an interesting Daytona. But yeah, I'm with you on AJ Allmendinger. As far as value this week, if you follow me on Twitter at Rotodoc, I tweeted out my model versus the lines, and the opening lines I was pretty much showing no value. Since AJ Allmendinger has drifted to 17-1 out there, still not quite showing value. I'm at like plus 1725 or somewhere in that neighborhood, but it's about as close as value as we're going to get. The only other values I show right now are Ross Chastain 60-1, and I'm not picking him because of Daniel Suarez. And then, Suarez needs to potentially win to get into the playoffs. And then the only other value I'm showing is Christopher Bell, who has just recently drifted to 14-1. So if I do make a bet, I will probably end up betting Christopher Bell, but AJ Allmendinger right there on the cusp for that as well for me. So we're going to go with AJ Allmendinger as our victory lane pick, simply because Christopher Bell's pit crew may screw him once again. So that'll do it for this episode of Running Hot. Thanks for listening to the Go Bowling at the Glen episode here on Action Network's Motorsports Betting Podcast. We'll be back this time next week to talk about bets for the crazy Coke Zero Sugar 400 at Daytona. Stevie, I know we're going to have a ton of bets for that one. We always love bets for that. It's going to be a crazy race. So we're looking forward to that one. On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening. We'll see you here next week on Running Hot from Action Network.